Since early history, humans found shelter in caves and under trees. They then formed groups creating oases. A more complex society occurred. Different cultures and urban patterns came together to shape the story of civilization. Your nation station, Oman FM, proudly presents Voice of Architecture, a weekly journey into the world of architecture, from ancient to classical, towards modernity and beyond. A show discussing global architectural landmarks, well-known architects, traditional buildings that define the history of Oman, new trends in design, sustainable solutions, and so much more. Voice of Architecture, with architect Ali Al-Lawati, and produced by Ahmed Al-Arami, only on Your Nation Station.
Assalamu alaikum, dear listeners, and welcome to the Voice of Architecture with your host Ali Al-Lawati. Today, dear listeners, we are talking about the architecture of Dhofar and Salalah, and we will be talking with one of the academics who are working at Dhofar University at the Faculty of Architecture a few years ago and spent some time in Salalah. It is a pleasure, dear listeners, to welcome our guest for this episode, Dr. Dusko Kuzovic from Serbia. He graduated with a diploma in architectural engineering and a master's of science in architecture. Then he got a doctoral of technical sciences in architecture and urbanism from the Faculty of Architecture at the University of Belgrade. As a student, he received 2 awards in architecture in Yugoslavia, and also he was teaching in several universities in Europe and Middle East, and of course in Dhofar University in Oman a few years ago. Dr. Dusko, it is a pleasure to have you here through Oman English FM.
Thank you very much, and greetings from Belgrade.
Thank you for accepting the invitation, and I'm glad again to host you in Oman, but this time through a phone. I hope you will visit Oman soon. Before talking about architecture of Salalah and Dhofar, I would like to highlight about your experience in architecture. How did you started your architectural career as an academic person, and what was the reason to choose architecture as a subject to study it?
From the moment I became aware of myself and the life around me, there was no alternative profession for me. I wanted to be an architect. In my childhood, I drew mostly houses, but also nature, people. And I was engaged in sculpture, photography. I studied philosophy, history of art. I learned foreign languages and dead languages, also like Old Slavic, Latin. And for me, the most important and useful, studying of music. Namely, I've been studying the classical guitar. Actually, I wanted to become an architect who understands the world around as more as possible. This is achievable only through education. Therefore, I tried to acquire a broad and a comprehensive education.
Right. I remember the architect Frank Lloyd Wright, the American architect, who was inspired by the music in his architecture, and always he assumed that the architectural works it is like a musical note. So it is nice to know that beside your architectural study, you studied the music as well. I would like to highlight about your experience here in Oman, specifically in Dhofar, in Dhofar University in Salalah. Could you share about your experience about Dhofar and the people of Dhofar?
Yes, of course. During my stay in Salalah, I met there many wonderful people. It was a pleasure for me to study and research the traditional architecture of Salalah, Mirbat, Rakut, Sadah, etc. And especially, I studied the Jebali vernacular architecture studiously and carefully. The material I collected there helps me to complete 2 books with the mentioned topics on history of Salalah architecture and the Gebali traditional architecture.
You mentioned that you wrote 2 books on architecture of Salalah.
Yes, I'm working on 2 books. One is on history of architecture and urbanism of Salalah, and the second one is on Gebali traditional architecture, because during my stay there, I made few researches, and one of them was on traditional Gebali architecture. For me, is the most impressive part of my architectural experience.
Yeah. I know that Dhofar and Salalah in specific, they are having a diversity in their geography. People, they think that Dhofar, it is a mountainous area, but they have the mountains, they have the desert, and they have the coast as well. So could you talk to us about the mountain architecture of Dhofar, please?
Yes, with pleasure. I think that the natural values of a region are exceptional, and they've been preserved not only by historical circumstances. I think the respect for the environment is a part of the culture in Dhofar, and I think is a crucial characteristic of Dhofar culture. The second most important influence comes from frankincense. Frankincense is the main generator of Dhofar culture, and indirectly helping the culture, helping the economy, indirectly as a generator of urbanism and architecture. The frankincense tradition has largely shaped the culture and the economy. It, on one side, it has brought the experience from other countries and other cultures, and in the same way, it was a kind of proxy for export of Dhofar culture.
Through trading, you mean?
Throughout the world. So the culture of building and construction exists for a few thousand years, and we have there many witnesses for my claims, like Sumhuram, Al-Balid, and I have to repeat again, traditional Gebali house, and in the same time, mobile architecture by Badawi culture, not just in Dhofar, it's a wider in the region.
You mentioned about the goods, the frankincense in Salalah, and I believe that the wealth affected the architecture there. So when we compare the south with the north, we could see that what is special about the Salalah and the Dhofari houses and the Dhofari architecture, it is a stone architecture from the foundation till the parapet. But in the other regions, you will find the mud bricks, you will find the clay architecture. So I think it is a little related to the wealth. But talking about the urban scale of Dhofar and the different settlements type in the region of Dhofar, if you could highlight about it, please.
Yes, of course. Regarding urbanism, we can define 2 specific areas. It's old and the new parts. The old urbanism is preserved, and settlements like Al-Hafa, Mirbat, Rakut, and represents a treasure, important not only for the culture of Oman, but for the whole world. So we can talk on 2 parts, like material parts of urban knowledge, urban design knowledge, and intangible elements of the urban design knowledge. Talking on the technical elements, we can talk on the street system, very exact and very precise. After that, the distribution of public area in the settlement, the way of organizing the neighborhood. Neighborhoods is highly important, and the countries like countries in the Southern Europe, might be good witness for the importance of how you organize the neighborhood and the settlement, and the vertical regulation of the buildings, vertical hierarchy in the settlement, and on the other part, we have intangible elements of the settlement, but they shape the settlement equally strong like material part. I'm talking on the views, colors, the relation between light and shadow, contrasts, respect for the topography and flora. After that, distribution of attractive points inside the settlement. In one word, we can talk in the spirit of the place, in Latin genius loci, which is distinct and strong in every one of the settlements in Dhofar I have the opportunity to visit. The new part of Dhofar settlement, especially in Salalah, contains many cultures and experiences in one whole. Actually, I see the multicultural attitude as a fundamental part of the culture of Oman. It's a good because it's a treasure. Specific overlapping of the new and old urban matrix, actually completely new street system adjusted to a new technologies, high level of the communal equipment are the main characteristics of the new settlements in Dhofar. But sometimes I have to mention it, not always accompanied by high level of communal discipline. It's a part it must be worked on in the future.
How you feel the old settlements, the old Salalah, how it is connected to the new one?
Old part of Salalah is a huge treasure and should be preserved and presented on a slightly a better way than is in fact today. I think the traditional part of Salalah are losing the battle between contemporary technologies, and I think should be better preserved and better included in the contemporary life, because old towns are magnet for tourism, and it might be very good support for contemporary economy, helping to build the brand of the region. So indirectly might support production of frankincense, might support production of food, or many different kinds of human production. Al-Hafa or Is-Salalah should be more preserved and presented as a part of the cultural history. And it is not, believe me, I've seen a lot of good and not so well preserved parts of the traditional cities. You have in Dhofar precious part of the world culture and world heritage, so you must pay attention on it.
Yes. Talking about architecture of Dhofar, when we are talking about Salalah, it is associated with the Yemeni cultural sphere, in particular about Mahra and Hadramaut. So could you little highlight the architecture of Dhofar from your observation when you were working in Salalah as an academic at the University of Dhofar?
As I mentioned, in urbanism we have old and the new, and in architecture we have old part and the new part of contemporary part of architecture. Regarding traditional architecture, I have to mention that traditional architecture has slight difficulties to cover the needs of modern family life today. But traditional architecture solution can find the place in many areas of life, and it worth to be preserved. For the first, we have to talk on philosophy of Omani traditional architecture. It is specific to other areas of Arabian Peninsula because it contains traces of the architecture of a large area and cultures that were covered by Omani Empire in the past. Here we can talk on several important urban centers. I mentioned them, like Salalah, Mirbat, Rakut, and the second part, rural territory. Each of them must need the attention of architectural conservation profession. It is necessary to preserve them for the sake of cultural identity of Dhofar and Oman. Also, they offer many economic advantages in tourism. I mentioned building a brand for the needs of economy, etc. After the 1975, we have many examples of contemporary architecture. Generally, it illustrates the gradual conquest for new architectural solutions, construction technologies, the tempo of the opening to the rest of the world, and the problems that every society has in this process. So we should pay attention to several characteristic layers where each takes about one decade. They are wonderful and valuable architectural solutions. But we have also some examples which illustrates an insufficient understanding of the technology, new materials, structure, or the form. My humble opinion is that we should always take into account the four elements of modern architecture. For the first, the function. We can translate in the question, does it meet the needs of the family life or company life? The second one is the material and the compliance with the local environment. After that is the construction, which must be consistent with the purpose of the building, material selected for the building, and for sure easy to maintain as a part actually of traditional architecture. And at the end, the form. Form must be in harmony with the landscape, tradition, culture, religion, and especially I have to emphasize the question, is it necessary to be unique or not? So step by step with hard work, as it has been in the past, the Dhofar region has a lot of potentials to become an important place in the world architecture map.
Voice of Architecture.
Nice to know about your observation on the traditional and the contemporary architecture of Salalah. And I would like to add that I visited Salalah many times and I noticed that the traditional architecture before 1975, they are having the courtyards on the upper level, and we can see that the houses are very large and very spacious, that because of the businesses and the trading was existed. Dr. Dusko, during your stay in Salalah, I know that you were working on many projects. So could you highlight about your experience and the projects you were working on there?
Yes, of course. The three main projects are the traditional architecture of the Gebali people. And for that project, at the end, we got some state support, and I'd like to say thank you very much for the support. The second one is Atlas of Traditional Architecture of Dhofar, covering urban, rural, and the nomadic mobile architecture. I think mobile architecture.
It is a book?
So books are in progress now.
Okay.
And the third one is Urbanism in Architecture of Salalah. Speaking on material, I would like to emphasize first the book, The Architecture of Oman by Salma Damluji. It's, I think, a magnificent piece of architectural knowledge. And going back in the past, I think a good point is Lorimer and the Gazetteer of Arabia. Well, description of the Salalah architecture and the concept of the city is a very good witness of the Salalah urban and architectural history.
Dr. Dusko, are these three titles you mentioned, are these books? And are they different than the other two books you mentioned at the beginning you working on about the architecture of Salalah?
Yeah, thank you for your question. Actually, I'm working on three books in parallel. The first one is Traditional Architecture of Gebali people. The second one is Urbanism and Architecture of Salalah. And the third one is my humble attempt to make an atlas of traditional architecture of Dhofar. The first one, Traditional Architecture of Gebali people, should present for the first traditional Gebali house. I think it's a unique concept and very interesting, really interesting piece of architecture, because it's we can find the similar solutions along east coast of the Red Sea. We can following the same type of the building around the Mediterranean area, especially Cyprus, Syria, and the present part of the Turkey. And following to the north, we can find pretty much the same architectural solutions in the Balkan region. So it's a very, I think it's interesting to compare small differences and variations from Dhofar along to Yemen and following further towards the north.
All the best, Dr. Dusko, in your research work and the written projects you are following and the books you are writing right now on Dhofar architecture and Salalah. Thank you very much for your time sharing with us about your experience and observations on architecture of Salalah. And our dear listeners, I hope you enjoyed the interview with Dr. Dusko Kuzovic, the academic and the architect from Serbia.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk on the architecture of Dhofar and Salalah. Dhofar and especially people of Oman will have forever a particularly important place in my heart and soul. Thank you again.
Since early history, humans found shelter in caves and under trees. They then formed groups creating oases. A more complex society occurred. Different cultures and urban patterns came together to shape the story of civilization. Your nation station, Oman FM, proudly presents Voice of Architecture, a weekly journey into the world of architecture, from ancient to classical, towards modernity and beyond. A show discussing global architectural landmarks, well-known architects, traditional buildings that define the history of Oman, new trends in design, sustainable solutions, and so much more. Voice of Architecture, with architect Ali Al-Lawati, and produced by Ahmed Al-Arami. Only on Your Nation Station.